This is Grace Notes. I'm Alan Button, and our guest today is Mr. Avron Upchurch. Avron is, I suppose some would call, an elder statesman, but by no means shows his age. We'll come back to that in a minute or two. Avron was brought up on a tobacco farm in Lee County, North Carolina, one of 7 children, and went on to be long and heavily involved in his community, educated in North Carolina, and is here with us as someone who continues actively as a volunteer master gardener with the Cooperative Extension Agency and active in his church, an Army veteran, and we'll touch on some of those things as we go along. But let me first say, welcome, Avron. Thank you for being here.
Thank you for inviting me.
Tell you what, if we could, Avron, and actually so that this doesn't get forgotten, you've been married now for 67 years to Mary
That's
Upchurch.
Correct.
Well, tell you what, let's go back to some of those early days. What was it like being brought up on a tobacco farm in Lemon Springs? What are your recollections and highlights?
It was a family farm. Everybody worked. I remember milking a cow at 7 years old. Uh-huh. Everybody had assigned chores that they had to do every morning, every evening. And you did them properly, or my father let you know that you needed to improve. We played together. We worked together. That was just a lifestyle.
Well, in your early days in particular, that was in the depths of the Great Depression.
The early days were, I can remember, one winter, it was November before I got a pair of shoes, and Dad sold a cow to buy shoes for the children. But everybody had the same situation. We were not the exception.
And somehow you made it through those years and educated in Lee County early on?
Yes, graduated from Greenwood School. It was a union school at the time, grades 1 through 12. Graduated in 1947.
And went on from there to North Carolina State University.
Yes, enrolled in North Carolina State University in the fall of 48 in agricultural education, occupation I had wanted to do since I was in the 9th grade.
I understand from what you and I were talking about before we came into the studio that your education at NC State was interrupted for a period. Tell us about that.
Uncle Sam saw a need for me. That I did anticipate, but wasn't excited about. But I was drafted out of college after, I believe, 2 deferments, educational deferments. But when the Chinese came in pushing the U.S. South, they were taking anybody they could draft, and I was a drafted person. But I made the best of it.
Pushing south into the Korean Peninsula.
Yes, right.
So it was during the Korean War.
Yes, sir. But I did not go to Korea. I went to Europe, Germany, and France for 18 months.
Uh-huh. What year did you get married? Let's see, I guess I could do the math, actually. 67 years.
1952.
That would make 1952. Okay.
Yes, sir.
So, and you were overseas when your first daughter was born?
Yes, sir. She was 11 months old when I first saw her.
Well, it would have been quite a treat, I'm sure, coming home to see her.
It was. I didn't know what to expect. Of course, I had pictures shared with me, but that's not like seeing the real child.
Uh-huh. And what's her name?
Diane.
And where does she live now?
She lives in Greensboro. She's a retired music teacher from the Guilford County school system. And she didn't get her music talent from her parents. We don't play instruments, nor do we sing. But she's an excellent pianist.
And you have another daughter.
Vicky. She lives in really 2 places. She has a child in Oshkosh, Wisconsin, and one in Chicago. Uh-huh. And they have residences in both places.
I see.
And I think that's where both our grandsons married girls from up there, so that's where they're going to remain the rest of their lives. Uh-huh. We see them periodically throughout the year.
So you've got a couple of grandsons and also great-grandchildren.
Yes, we have 2 great-granddaughters and 1 great-grandson.
I'll tell you what, let's talk for a minute about this first song that you've identified, because it has some connection, I would say, with your Army service. God Bless the USA by Lee Greenwood.
Yes, sir.
Why is that special to you?
I think the words in it send a message to every person who's interested in this country. And I think patriotism is something that we need to stand up for and stand up to. For we've had a lot of men and women to give their lives that we might sit here and do what we're doing today without any editing.
Yeah,
but the words just mean a lot to me.
No censorship. I'm often struck by the relative uniqueness of the First Amendment free speech and free press clause in our Constitution. You're absolutely right. There's freedom to say and write what we think, unlike the case in many places around the world.
That is correct.
Tell you what, before we hear the song, can you tell us something about the impact that your military service had on you? It was, after all, it interrupted your college career.
It did. It gave me maturity. It gave me the opportunity to see people from other regions of the country that I had never seen. For when I went to North Carolina State at Raleigh, I had been to that town twice. So my life was very limited in geography and in seeing different people. But the different people I saw in the military gave me a concept of what lives are like and attitudes are like from other sections of the country. And it helped me adapt to people that were, I'll say, somewhat unlike me in behavior, language, and so forth. But when I came back, I was able to return to the university and finish my education. And the maturity phase of it, I did much better academically when I returned than I did prior to being drafted. If I had a wife, I had a child, I had responsibility. And so Avron had learned how to do some things with maturity.
Well, let's hear the song, God Bless the USA, by Lee Greenwood.
If tomorrow all the things were gone, I'd worked for all my life, and I had to start again.
That was God Bless the USA by Lee Greenwood. If you're just joining us, our guest today on Grace Notes is Mr. Avron Upchurch. Avron, we were talking about the impact of your military service on you and your perspective, but also how it interrupted your own educational career. Tell us what happened educationally for you after you got back from your time of service.
Of course, I continued in the same college major, agricultural education, with the fact that now I had a family to support. I was on the GI Bill. My wife started to work at Belk's department store, and we did very well. We didn't have any financial difficulties. I worked part-time during holidays, during the basketball season at the Coliseum, ushering, but we were able to survive that. And after, I believe, a year and a half there, I got my bachelor's degree in agricultural education. And
did you continue immediately thereafter into the master's program?
No, I took a job at Fuquay Springs, Fuquay Arena, as they call it, sort of a twin town. And after one semester, I went back and started my master's degree part-time, and after a 3-year period, obtained the master's degree in ag education and continued to teach in the field.
Well, I know from some of the information that I had received earlier that education became a big part of your career and life. What did you do immediately after your NC State experience?
Well, after the Fuquay tenure, I moved to Deep River School. I taught ag there for 3 years and was invited by the superintendent of schools, J.J. Lentz, to come and talk with him about ag technology. For that was the curriculum they were trying to put into 5 different technical institutes, community colleges throughout the state. And he wanted me to assume that role, and I did. And, of course, I was one of the first 3 people employed at the college where we had no facilities, no students. We just had some plans for a building.
This was the Lee County Industrial Education Center?
At that time, yes, sir. And while you mentioned that, the name change had a metamorphosis. We were Lee County Industrial Education Center, Central Carolina Technical Institute, Technical College, and then became a community college.
Became what we know it today as Central Carolina Community College.
Yes, sir. And it has a reputation today of being, I think, one of the top 10 institutions in North Carolina.
Well, I know they have outstanding programs there.
They do have some unusual programs, and we were primarily a rural community at the time. So we had to come up with unique programs that others didn't have.
What was your role with the college?
Well, I started out as Ag Tech coordinator, and after 1 year became the evening director and started the evening programs for the college. And then as it grew, titles changed, assignments changed, and I was director of occupational education for a period of time. And during that time, Mr. Lentz, again, the superintendent of Lee County Schools, asked me to be his assistant superintendent of Lee County Schools, and I served there for about 2.5 years. Had the opportunity to go back to the college, and I took advantage of that opportunity. So that's where my real love was, rather than hardcore administration, to working with faculty and students.
And you were there then during the tenure of Dr. Marvin Joyner.
Absolutely. I served with 3 presidents, and Dr. Joyner was the last one with whom I served. He was a very visionary type person and understood people. He understood industry. He was very unique, but an outstanding administrator.
I understand that you have some special familiarity with the history of the college. You've done a little writing about it?
Yes, sir, I did.
Maybe more than a little?
A little more than a little. After I retired, Dr. Joyner asked me if I would write the history of the college. His approach was, you have lived it. What about recording it for us? So I wrote the first 40 years, and the title of the document, and I believe it's about 200 and some pages, is entitled The History of Central Carolina Community College, the First 40 Years. In that, I named the people who were employed, who the first board of trustees were, how that grew, and the people who we hired early on, and how their participation and love for what we were to do really set the stage for what the college is today.
Speaking of the love for what you do, in my experience, there aren't many who get into education without thinking that there is some special value in education and importance in education. What's your perspective on education generally? And why did you spend so many years yourself involved in education?
I like to learn, and I like to share what I learn with other people. And I can say that for my wife and myself. We both are people-oriented. We are givers, not takers. So we want to share what we have with anyone who can benefit from it. And that's what the college was set up to do as an industrial education center. It was designed strictly as a vocational technical school to train people for the technical occupations, automobile mechanics, air conditioning, drafting, electricians. And that's the way we started. And practical nursing was the first group of graduates we had. And all of that is recorded in this document that I have written. But people would come, adults who'd been out of school, say 20 years, and they said, I can't learn, but I need to learn an occupation. I said, we will help you learn. You can do it. And I see people today who came along in those years, and I don't know them, but they think they know me from having seen me. But that's rewarding to know that you help someone make a good living, change their lifestyle, and help their family become a better family. That's the excitement I got out of working with the students at the college.
And of course, there are hundreds, if not thousands, whom you've influenced without their even having known you or known about you.
That's correct. The thousands would be better. For when I started to work, as I said, there were no faculty, no students. And when I left in 1994, we had 3,400 curriculum students. So you never know whose life one can touch and change.
Of course, the foundation that you laid continues to influence students even today in 2019.
Yes, and we sought faculty who were concerned about the lives of other people and wanted to give their all to helping them. And we told faculty, if a student has difficulty, it's your responsibility to help them outside the classroom. And they did that.
Let's circle back, if we could, Avron, to another song that you've selected, and I'll make an attempt at a segue here to the Ballad of the Green Berets, and the segue that comes to my mind is that I actually heard this song a few years back as part of a graduation ceremony for a Special Forces contingent. That song is still sung at the end of the very significant educational process for Special Forces as they graduate. What is it about the song that is especially meaningful to you?
I think the words of that song sends a great message to us, tells us about the trials, the tribulations, the dangers, and the deaths that many of our men and women faced, so that we can do today here in this country what we are doing. For had we given in and just not gone there, it could have changed that region of the world. And the United States being the country that it is, trying to protect people, to give them a better life, those words just tell me about what the forces of the United States went through to allow us to do what we are doing today.
And, of course, the song itself comes out of the Vietnam era.
Yes, sir.
In particular. Let's hear it. The Ballad of the Green Berets by Sergeant Barry Sadler.
Fighting soldiers from the sky, fearless men who jump and die, have him win the Green Beret.
That was The Ballad of the Green Berets by Sergeant Barry Sadler. Our guest today is Avron Upchurch. Avron, let me have you tell us something about why you've done some of the things you've done outside of your vocation. And I have in mind what I understand has been involvement in prison education and involvement with mentally and physically disabled children and adults. What have you done in those areas, and why have you done it?
Well, let's start with the prison programs that the college had with Harnick Correctional Center. We started there when there was primarily a youth center with preparing those young men to get their GED or adult high school diploma. And then the prison system saw that we were doing a good job with that and asked us to expand into the vocational training for these men so that when they were released from prison, they could have an occupation to fall back upon to seek employment and hopefully not return to prison. And there was a very high recidivism rate at that time among their inmates that they released. At one time, we had about 20 personnel employed there in a variety of curriculums, such things as welding, carpentry, basic automotive mechanics, computer repair, things like that we had for them. In fact, we had an associate degree program in business administration.
What about your work with mentally and physically disabled children?
Yes, I've always been one who want to lift up those who are less fortunate. That's just, I guess, in my geology.
In your DNA.
DNA, yeah, that's a good word, DNA. I don't know who asked me, but I served as the county chairman for the mentally retarded children, they called it then. They have other names for it now. And we started a daycare, actually an educational program, in Sanford, and it was operated without tax dollars through grants, contributions, and volunteers. And a spin-off from that was the starting of the Lee County Industries.
LCI.
LCI, right. A very important industry in this county, and their job was to train adults to be able to work in industry doing repetitive type jobs. And again, it's just something that's a segment of the population. They get excited when they can say, I got a paycheck, I earned some money, I'm working. And it boosts them up as a human being. And that's what we need. Everybody needs to feel important.
Well said. You somehow have managed over the years to spend time outside gardening in your yard. And in fact, it was Minda Daughtry who first brought you to our attention, one of our local cooperative extension agents. What is it that you do in the Master Gardening Program?
Well, I love to dig in the dirt. I grew up in the dirt, and it's never gotten out of my veins whatsoever. I started in the Master Gardener Program. I was in the first class of the county in 1996, and I've been very active in it, teaching some classes to the public, I guess I supervised the 3 different classes when we were without horticultural agents. Facilitated, I guess, would be a better word. And again, it's a way of helping people. And we have a helpline where master gardeners come in like 3 hours a day, certain months of the year. And anyone can come in or call in with a problem. And we will do our very best to help them find a solution to it. And we can go so far as to contact the university, North Carolina State University, and get the professors to help us come up with an answer.
Is there anything about your own yard or garden that is a special item of pride for you? Or that gets...
I don't have a formal garden. I see a pretty plant somewhere, and I say, I got to find a place for it. And so I enjoy flowers and blooming shrubs more, but I just enjoy working with plants and sharing them. I give away lots of plants where they have multiplied.
You've identified another song for us, entitled A Few Good Men by the Gaither Vocal Band. How does that fit into everything we've been talking about?
Well, sometimes you can't get a multitude of people to do what needs to be done. You have to find a few good people, leaders, who are willing to give of themselves, give of their time, and share their knowledge and expertise so that they can become better in whatever it is they want to do. And I think the words of having a few good men to be leaders, to set examples, is what we need in society today.
Well, and I see, too, from the lyrics that there's a significant faith theme as part of this song, and that reminds me of your longtime involvement with your own church. One of the lines that gets my attention fits in with some of what we were talking about before we came into the studio. Men full of compassion who laugh and love and cry, men who will face eternity and aren't afraid to die. Any closing thoughts on that, Avron?
Well, I'm a man of faith. And these words speak to what a person of faith needs to do. And that's why I like that song. It kind of points out you've got to believe in something higher than man. And I do that.
Avron, it's been a real privilege, a special treat to have you here with us today. Thank you very much.
You're welcome. It's been my pleasure.
Let's hear the song, A Few Good Men by the Gaither Vocal Band.
What this dying world could use is a willing man of God who dares to go